And if you need a good headline to boost your mood, I have one. Mississippi Department of Child Protective Services has partnered with the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption to expand foster care adoption programs in our state. And joining us in the studio and over at supertalktv.com, we've got Miss Kimberly Wheaton. She's the Deputy Commissioner of Child Welfare here in Mississippi. And Miss Rita Soronen. She's President and CEO of the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption, and she has made her way to Mississippi for a big day. And a big day it has been for you ladies, so welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
I am so excited about this private-public sort of partnership. And I was reading, Rita, where the foundation actually is the one who reached out to Mississippi for this wonderful opportunity. So set up the stage for us. How did that kind of come about? How did you guys look to Mississippi and say, we need to be there doing what we want to do?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you. And we're delighted to be here. Look, we've been in this space since 1992. The Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption is a national nonprofit public charity. And around 2000, 2001, 2002, we began to look at how can we do more than just raise awareness, which is important, raise awareness about this cause of foster care adoption, and began to look at that part of the foster care system for children who've been freed for adoption and are sitting in foster care waiting to be adopted. Nationally, about 20,000 children every year turn 18 or 21 and leave foster care without the family we've promised them. So at that point, we began to implement a test program that we created, a child-focused recruitment program, and tried it in 7 sites in 2004 and very quickly began to grow it. It's really a simple program. We provide grant funds to organizations to hire a full-time adoption professional who implements this model that has been shown to be better than business as usual. So in 2005, we began to expand the program, and Mississippi was one of those states that we began to expand. But private philanthropy could only go so far, and so we could hire 1 or 2 recruiters in a state, but still had that long-term relationship. About 2017, we said, we've got to do more. We've got to be able to implement this program because it was working, and it was working for those children, teenagers, children in sibling groups, children with special needs, those children who were more likely to age out of care. It really was working. And we began to implement a strategy of looking at public-private partnerships that could expand the program so that both the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption and the agencies, whether they're public or private, could commit to a co-investment relationship and begin to take this program to scale. And by scale, we mean how many of these adoption professionals, and we call them Wendy's Wonderful Kids Recruiters. They're called that because we're the charity of choice with the Wendy's system. When it was the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption was founded by Dave Thomas, the founder of Wendy's. And so we actually, I think it was 2 things. I think we were both talking about it to each other. Is there any possible way we could bring this program to scale in Mississippi? The department was so receptive to the conversation and quickly, I mean, quicker than the 13 other states that are at scale right now out of all of the states in the U.S. We're very quickly agreed that this might be a good idea. So I think it was a combination of the relationships we had in place. There's great leadership now at the department that was receptive to the conversation. And so we signed the contract just this month, and this program is ready to launch May 1st.
I love this. And Kimberly, I can only imagine who was there to answer the call to be like, Wendy's, are we sure? Is this a joke or is this a prank? No, I'm sure it didn't go down that way. But knowing that the good work that Mississippi has been doing over the last several years in trying to increase the number of children who are fostered or adopted, or looking at the different ways and tools to help families get reconnected, I mean, it does feel like it was a really good fit. So from y'all's perspective there at Child Protective Services, I mean, you jumped on it.
Absolutely. Wendy's Wonderful Kids was in the state, and they had about 1 to 2 recruiters in the state, and we saw an opportunity to expand this program. We're able to go from about 2 to 10 recruiters in the next year or so, maybe very soon, because we already have 5 recruiters hired for the program. Right now in the state, we have about 3,860 children in care, and of those children, over 1,200 of them currently have either a permanent or concurrent plan for adoption. And so this program will help us recruit for those children. Children that are older than 8 children with special needs, sibling groups, and that is oftentimes those children that need more attention from our staff. And so our staff have so many responsibilities to be able to partner with the Dave Thomas Foundation and the Wendy's Wonderful Kids program. We're able to allow those recruiters to just actually focus on those efforts for those children.
And I would say, Rita, when you talk about recruitment, that's just finding the perfect fit for those kids. It's not necessarily recruiting other kids. It's recruiting families that may have the right setup or the right interest to even think about, bringing on a foster kid that meets the requirements of the Wendy's Wonderful Kids program, I think is pretty cool. And two, reading that you guys did a rigorous evaluation. Yes. You mentioned that it's working. Well, what did y'all find through your evaluation of kids who went through this program?
Right. And as we began to grow the program, we had the numbers in place, again, just with private philanthropy at the table. And in about 2007, we said, look, we've got the numbers, we see the success, and we're working with the Wendy's partners that can help us do a pretty picture of this. But if at an evidence-based level it really isn't any better than business as usual, then we either need to refine it or get out of this program and figure something else where we can be value added. So we engaged Child Trends out of Washington, D.C. to do a 5-year randomized control trial, rigorous evaluation, comparing the success or lack of it of Wendy's Wonderful Kids in 27 states and literally comparing in each jurisdiction children served by this program against children served by whatever that business as usual was in that jurisdiction. At the end of 5 years, we realized this is when we have to begin to grow the program because the results were phenomenal. On average, a child served by this program, no matter what their age is or their circumstance or if they've been freed for adoption, whatever the circumstance is, on average, a child served by this program is about 1.7 times more likely to be adopted. But for that very particular population that we've already talked about, and particularly teens and children with specific mental health challenges, it's up to 3 times or sometimes more than 3 times or 300% better than business as usual. So once we had both the duration of testing this for that number of years and the rigorous evaluation, we felt obliged to begin to figure out how can we talk to states, what different strategy could we do to take this program to scale? Because the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption, for example, doesn't have the kind of philanthropy that we could in some states that needed 40 or 50 recruiters. We couldn't afford to do that.
Right.
But these children are in the custody of the state or the county. It's both their moral and legal obligations, so there might be a way to look at, is there a potential public-private partnership that we can engage in? And we began that with the state of Ohio, and now Mississippi is stepping up. They're the 14th state that's either in the process of scaling or is fully scaled. And again, we mean, are there enough of these recruiters that are employed full-time that can cover that focused population of children? And so we're so excited that the leadership of Mississippi decided this was a good thing to do.
And Kimberly, when you start filling these roles of Wendy's Wonderful Kids recruiters, I mean, what's the great guidelines? Like, who's the A-star or the all-star kind of person that would be perfect for the job?
So the beginning of our team most of them were internal employees already. We look for people with social service experience, social workers or related degrees, people that just have a heart for the work. We introduced the first part of the staff this morning at an event at the office, and I will tell you, they have personalities for the people, and that made them a unique bunch. So we're looking for people that are not afraid to not only connect with the children, but connect to the community and make sure that the voices of our children are heard.
Because I'm sure this is not your typical 8 to 5 kind of job, right? I mean, it's on as long as the kid still needs a home. It's trying to coordinate and network and think through, and also think of all the other services that the children may need as well. I think oftentimes when we think of Child Protective Services or those in the system, I mean, you've got someone that's got their case file that also is meeting their other needs that they may need, not just necessarily trying to, make a match with a home or adoption. There's so much to educate, which I know y'all still raise awareness with through the Dave Thomas Foundation, but this is just a different sort of piece to the puzzle of that. How do you balance it all, Rita? I mean, it's a lot.
But it's the right thing to do. We always, Dave Thomas, our founder, we carry on his legacy. And his famous quote that we use every day, it's on my wall at work and it's across the office, these children aren't someone else's responsibility, they're our responsibility. And so it's incumbent on those of us that have either the resources or the experience or the passion to make sure that these children don't linger in foster care, don't age out of foster care without a family. That's the birthright of every child. So yes, we continue to raise awareness. We have a robust social media program. We've got other programs, National Adoption Day, the Adoption Friendly Workplace.
We're going to get into all of that and more. We'll
Okay.
stick with us, Ms. Rita, coming up next here on Good Things. Out more. But today we are celebrating the good news that Mississippi Department of Child Protection Services is partnering with the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption to expand foster care adoption programs here in our state. So we're continuing our conversation with Kimberly, the Deputy Commissioner of Child Welfare, and Miss Rita, who is the President and CEO of the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption. And we were talking about all the great sort of programs that the Dave Thomas Foundation does. And I feel like anybody who's driven through Wendy's, had a Frosty, has connected Dave Thomas's name to adoption in some capacity. Maybe we've bought the little Frosty keychain that went to it and all of that. And that really hit home for him. What inspired Dave Thomas to sort of make adoption his legacy in terms of philanthropy?
Yeah, Dave Thomas was adopted. And although he was adopted as an infant, he had a challenging life. His mother passed away when he was relatively young. His father moved from place to place. And he was actually raised by his grandmother. So that story mirrors a lot of our youth in foster care. They're raised by grandparents, and he left home at 16 and decided to just set out on his own. So he appreciated that he still had family, that he was adopted, but he understood that we needed to do better by children in care, and he knew he was lucky that he didn't go back into the foster care system. So when he was getting on in his position as CEO of the Wendy's company, really wanted to put in action what was in their genes, which was giving back in their genes. I was thinking that was the wrong word.
In their Frosties, too.
In their Frosties, too. Which was giving back to the community, and decided to create the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption to respond to his passion for this very specific, not all adoption, and we celebrate all kinds of adoptions, whether it's infant or international, but we're a one-trick pony. We focus on children in foster care waiting to be adopted.
And you've expanded those efforts to helping states like Mississippi get more recruiters. Y'all call them Wendy's Wonderful Kids recruiters. And I was reading, Kimberly, where you guys will get, over the next 5 years, get to go from 1 to sort of 10. So at the max, at 10 recruiters, what are we looking at about the number of children that can be specifically helped?
That's correct. And so Wendy's Wonderful Kids Recruiter can have a caseload from 12 to 15 children. And so with that being said, we believe that if we have all 10 on board, they can serve up to 150 children at any given time. And as those children obtain permanency and roll off of their caseloads, then they can work with other children. And so who knows, we may be able to eventually get beyond 10, but that is where we're starting.
And starting you are, and that means that one more kid may have one more chance to make a connection to a forever home, or at least a stable place to connect and grow. What does it mean? I mean, you talk about the big numbers of the thousands that have been helped, or even the 150 that one recruiter could sort of service during their year or time. But it takes down to that one individual. So how important is it that each child over the age of 18 or up to the age 18, teenager, still has the opportunity to connect with a family? I was getting there, but it's still important,
yes,
even though they're teenagers, to have the opportunity to connect with a family. Why is that?
It's absolutely important. I mean, if you just think about us in any given day, the connections that we need, the support that we need, even as we become adults. So we want our children to have those opportunities, even those that are 16, 17, and 18. And of course, at that age, they may think, well, I don't want to be adopted, or I want to be on my own. But the recruiters are there to support them through that and talk to them about that, and really talk about what it is that they want and what they want from a family. family. We had a video today, and I'll let Rita speak to it, but we watched a video earlier today at the program at the office, and one thing I heard in there is that this program helps children be 2 times more likely to have someone to hug them at night. And that just resonated with me. And I was thinking through, as an adult, how many times do some of us walk through the door in the evening or at night and just hoping for someone to hug us or needing that hug? And so that's what this program allows us to do, to connect those children to those hugs, to those words, I love you, and to just being able to have a place to go during college break and in the summers, and people to vacation with. So it means a lot to have that lifelong support and connection.
Kimberly, you make me cry on good things, but I was just thinking too, as a mom of 2, how many things can be fixed with a good hug, right? Like your kid will, stop crying or just needs your comfort or your warm embrace. And then you too, when you have that bad day and you walk in and your kids offer you that warm embrace, there's just magical. There's just medicine in it that you can't, put in a bottle. And so Rita, I would love to hear more about any success story out of the Wendy's Wonderful Kids program.
Sure. Certainly the one we highlighted today was phenomenal. This young lady had been in foster care for 12 years. She had actually had 3 failed adoptions. In other words, she was in an adoptive placement. It didn't work out for whatever reason. I mean, think about that. Being in the system, being with what you think is your forever family, and then being sent back to the system. But having that happen 3 times. And so she was pretty skeptical about this notion of family for all the right reasons. She hadn't been, the system had failed her multiple times. But then the Wendy's Wonderful Kids recruiter, when she landed on her caseload, began to really look through who are the contacts that have been in this child's life, and found a former foster family, a mom and a dad, and talked to them, approached them, and began to tell them about this young lady, and they remembered her. They said, yes, we want to consider this. So the recruiter helped facilitate this relationship, get it going, until finally the young lady said, yes, I want this to happen. I want to be adopted. The beauty is she's going to be adopted this summer, sometime around June or July, exactly at the same time when she would have turned 18 and aged out of care. Never too old for family, ever too old for family. And yet we bring to the table this notion that somehow 18-year-olds will be fine. They're survivors. They've been in and out of the system. They understand, what this world is like. And so they'll be fine on their own. Maybe they will, but they shouldn't have to be. Right. And so that's what this story tells us. And we have others like that. We have one young man who was working with a Wendy's Wonderful Kids recruiter, kept talking about his best friend and his best friend's family and how he was there a lot. The recruiter just gently approached the best friend's family. They didn't know that he was available for adoption. Kids don't talk about their circumstances. They said, we would love to have him in our home. Fast forward 6 months or so, and they're at the courthouse ready for the hearing, and the judge, doing what the judge is supposed to do, talks to the children and said, what makes you feel good about this? Do you want to be adopted by this family? What makes you feel good? And he was really shy, but after some prodding, he finally looked up at the judge and said, look, now my best friend is going to be my brother. I mean, that's the kind of magic that happens with this program.
And if you think about, if you have teenagers in your own life, right, like, could they make it without you? No.
Absolutely not.
Right? I mean, yes, they have their own sense of identity, and maybe some are a little bit more strong-willed, or they're putting on a good front. But at the end of the day, they still need that good moral guidance and somewhere to come back to home base. And, Kimberly, speak to the difference between, I know the difference between fostering and adoption, but I think there's a lot of folks who may feel interested in fostering, but then terrified that it may have to end up in adoption. And that feels very final without really, knowing. So maybe they don't do anything out of that kind of fear. How does that kind of process happen?
Right. And so we have foster families, and that is one of the things that we talk to our foster families about in that process when we onboard them, when they become licensed. We talk about what are their plans. Do they want to just foster and give children temporary support and connection, or do they want to adopt and be a lifelong connection? We talk about what those changes would mean for their family, what responsibilities would transition them from the agency to that that family, and we try to give them a lot of support and wrap around them in that process. And one thing that we've done with this Wendy's Wonderful Kids expansion is that we've also changed our internal recruiting strategies. We have built an independent unit that are going to be full of recruiters, and they will recruit both foster families, and then they will also have the Wendy's Wonderful Kids unit within their umbrella that will recruit the adoptive families as well for those older youth. And so what we felt like is that they can keep a close connection as a group. They can know what the community wants to hear and needs to hear, and they can make sure that they're sharing the messages about the work that we're doing, and that they could just highlight the efforts of, these are the children that we serve, this is what we need, and this is how you can help us. If you don't feel like fostering is for you yet, come over to the agency and sit with us a day, visit a program, and maybe that will open your heart and your mind up to fostering or adopting one of these children. And we're open to that, and we're just trying to show ourselves open to the community in that way.
I always say, if you have that little bit of feeling or curiosity on the inside that maybe or could we or should we, not everyone's called to foster, not everyone's called to adopt, but there's so many of us that do just have that little bit of curiosity, and I hope today we nudge you over the edge to at least find out more information, because obvious Mississippi is doing some good things around trying to help children of all ages in the foster system. We're going to find out more, and we're continuing our celebration of the good news that Mississippi Department of Child Protection Services is partnering with the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption to expand foster care adoption programs. Finally, some good news to come out of the Child Protection Services, Kimberly. We were listening to Miss Rita talk about a success story, and within that, there had been some maybe failed attempts at adoption, or the child felt like maybe the system, in air quotes, failed her. And I know that's something just from a PR standpoint you guys run up against all the time. And I know that you're probably back there screaming, but there's more to it than what, sort of. But I do believe people feel that way because desperately they want to help, or they think somebody or something should be out there helping. And today we're getting to highlight all the great stuff that is going on. We were talking about and celebrating all the mass adoptions that have been going on since the pandemic released us all back into the world, all throughout the state. Are those just great days for you guys?
Oh, yes. Those are some of the best days and some of the best parts of our work. When you see adoptions achieved, when you see children obtain permanency, and even when you see children reunify with their birth families, and Ms. Rita is going to probably talk a little bit about that. But even in these recruiting efforts, we start looking for an adoptive family for this child or these children. But that doesn't mean that that will not be a part of their birth family or their biological family. What we try to do is go back to all of their connections in the community, in the schools. And so, Ms. Rita, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, sure, happy to. Look, there was a time in child welfare not so long ago where caseworkers and social workers wouldn't look at extended family members. Well, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. We've got to keep this child separate from family. And the idea that a child could go back to a family after parental rights had been terminated was just something unconsidered. But what the Wendy's Wonderful Kids recruiters do brilliantly is make sure that we search out extended family members. We want kids to stay where they identify, in their community if at all possible, in their culture if at all possible. And what they will not frequently, but what they occasionally will find is a parent may have been unable to care for a child because of substance abuse issues, but they've been able to go through recovery, they've worked through that, they've fixed that, and the recruiter may find that this family is fine now. And this child wants to go back to that family. And so even post termination of parental rights, there is often a reconnection with that family, and then sometimes a reunification and a legal adoption back by the original family. We say that more and more now in Wendy's Wonderful Kids.
Oh, I love that, because there's more and more resources that are being also made available to the families where the child is being taken away from or being removed from. Now, you're not sure the right language, Kimberly, to be honest with that, but it feels like we've elevated what we can offer both families and the child, with always the ultimate goal for everyone to sort of get healing and hope of reunifying, of coming back together. And you mentioned too something about shared parenting. What is that about?
Yes, and so in Mississippi, in our child protection services, we are advocates and big supporters of shared parenting. And what that is that we encourage foster families that are fostering children, whether they believe it's going to be a temporary situation or permanent, to work with the birth families if possible, if safe to do so, and share stories, exchange phone calls, exchange FaceTime videos. And we do that same thing with our adopted families. Again, you said something earlier, it takes a village. And that's the mantra that we try to share with everybody that's involved in this child's life, and to remind each other that we're here for what's in the best interest of that child.
And it's in the best interest of the community to take care of all of the children, right? I mean, it's not someone else's problem. It's our problem, especially if they're our neighbors and they're going to our churches or they're going to school with our kids. And so just having more awareness, normalizing this conversation, Rita, was the first thing that the Dave Thomas Foundation sort of started. But if you still feel like, okay, maybe that the adoption or the fostering part's not for me today, where can we start? If we're listening to good things, we feel like, man, I'd just love to be connected and somehow. What are some of those other ways that we can help make this possible for families?
Lots of ways to provide support. Look, reach out to your local agency, whether the State Department or private agencies. There's some phenomenal ones across the state of Mississippi. Frequently, they have volunteer opportunities. You can be a mentor to a child, or you can help during holiday time when there are gift drives for the families, or backpack times for school time. Lots of ways to just get your feet in and feel like you are helping someone. But, within your faith-based community or your place of employment, make sure there are adoption benefits in your package where you work. Ask if your faith community is interested in wrapping their arms around families who are fostering or adopting and providing resources or just a network. Lots of ways. Advocate. Look, this state is doing a lot at the legislative level to make sure that children are protected. Use your voice. And when you see a piece of legislation that's going to benefit children, make sure your legislators know you're behind that. Very simple and yet very complex ways to help, everything from just using your voice to fostering or adopting. Lots of ways to step in and help.
And you have been helping for 30 years. You've made this your profession, Miss Rita. How in the world did you find yourself creating a 30-year career in child welfare?
I think I think the path was set for me. I just didn't realize it. I've told the story. I came out as a little one kicking and screaming when I saw injustice for children, and I'd pointed out to probably the adults' dismay. I was always pointing it out. So I was born a child advocate, I think. And then charismatically, I was, my first daughter was born. She was about a year old. There was a horrendous case of abuse of an infant in our community who passed away, and that lit a fire for me. So I immediately started volunteering with a local child abuse prevention agency, learned all I could about abuse and neglect and the dynamics of what happens. Why do families do this? Look, no family wants to hurt their child typically, or neglect their child. Lots of issues that overlay families that are struggling. So learned as much as I could about it. What are the strategies for keeping kids out of care? I was there for quite some time, and then had the opportunity to move to the court-appointed special advocate, the CASA program. So that next layer of what happens when prevention fails and children are involved in court proceedings. How do we engage volunteers to be their advocates, their voices for their best interests? And then after about a decade there, had the opportunity to move to this position. And for me, it felt full circle. I'm not sure where that circle ends, but it felt full circle, from prevention to intervention. And what do we do when we've failed these children at every level, and now they're in care, simply waiting for a family? So it's been an incredible path. I've been honored to be on it, and it just makes me excited to get up every morning.
Kimberly, I don't think 30 years yet have you been in the profession, but you're walking towards it one step at a time, one day at a time. But I do feel like those that choose this profession and stick in it longer than 5 or 10 years, you realized that you had a calling for it, right? You connected the dots in some ways, because it's a tough job. I mean, those who show up every day and face everything that you have to face and work with all the caseloads that you have and don't give up hope, I mean, that takes a lot of strength. So what led you into the field of child welfare?
Oh, wow. I was a teenager, and like Miss Rita, I don't know if I was born kicking and screaming, but I was a kicker and a screamer. Just watching my classmates as I grew up, and children around me in my community going through different things. And as I became older, I realized, what some of that was. Some of it was poverty, some of it was neglect, and some of it was physical abuse. And I realized I wanted to be a part of the change. And I wanted to be in a place where I was able to impact systemic change. And so right out of graduate school, my heart just led me to child welfare. I did it for a couple of years. I went back into the mental health realm, and my heart called me back home again to CPS. And I've been here ever since 2013, back with the agency. And again, when I introduce myself, I always say I currently serve as the Deputy Commissioner of Child Welfare. I think it is definitely servant work. It is hard work, but we call it heart work. It takes your heart, and you have to be all in, and you have to remember your why. Why do you get up every day? Why do you do this every day? And for us and our teams, it's the children. I'm one of a senior leadership team of 10 people. And I can honestly say that I couldn't do this every day without them. And so I would say to anybody that's thinking about helping, whether working for the agency, working with one of our partnering foundations or agencies, just think about your why. And that remember, a child will appreciate your efforts forever. They may not remember your name or what exactly you look like, but they definitely won't forget your efforts.
And if we want to find out more information, Kimberly, where do we go?
So we have a website. You can go to www.mdcps.ms.gov.
And Miss Rita, where can we go to find out all about the Dave Thomas Foundation and all the great ways we can get connected there?
Lots of great resources on davethomasfoundation.org. We also have an 800 line, 800-ASK-DTFA for Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption.
Anytime you go through your Wendy's, buy your Frosty.
And absolutely, those proceeds benefit the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption.
It's a delicious way. And get the fries, too, because you can't eat a Frosty without dipping your fries into it. And y'all, thank you so much for your time. It's always a pleasure to shine some bright light on the good things that are going on for the welfare of our children in our state. So we look forward to having you back in 5 years when you renew it.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, y'all stick with us. We got more for you.